Good afternoon, everybody. It's Ty from DR Property Guys, and today I have the immense pleasure of sitting down with a very special person. This is Edith, and I welcome her to the program, and thank you for joining us.
And I want to say my last name is Meyerstein, and it's a real pleasure to be here and to join you.
Thank you very much, Edith. Thank you. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and
we've known each other for ages. He's like my son. So start.
That's actually the first question on the list. I actually came prepared, first time ever. So how long have we known each other?
We've known each other for so long. Thinking about it, we got to know each other about 15 years ago, and you would be seeing Ty as one of the most handsome young men that I had known. Just beautiful, beautiful eyes.
Poor you, if that's the case. Poor you.
Beautiful, beautiful eyes.
Low selection of men in Sosúa, it seems.
No way. I can detect quality when I get it and when I see it.
She's making me blush.
There you go. That's what I wanted to do. But all kidding aside, Ty, first time I met him, he was a lean, mean machine. And he was playing soccer, and I kept looking at him because he had such beautiful eyes.
We actually met at our office, didn't we?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Ty and his dad, George, were running a real estate, and I had just opened an office diagonally across the street, and I kind of calmly walked into their office and sat down and started a conversation with his dad, and that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah, 15 years ago, eh?
15 years.
It's been a while.
And I would say for myself, 15 years ago, and at least 30 pounds lighter.
I was 80 pounds lighter, probably, not more. But anyway.
But he was playing soccer.
I was. And I'm sorry to be using this paper, but it's better this way. So we do have a list of questions that we're going to get through. But so here's the next question. How did you end up being born in Sosúa?
Okay. I don't know whether the community knows much about it because we're fairly low-key. But before tourism became a reality here and the airport opened, I was part of a Holocaust survival community, Jewish community, but it wasn't really just Jewish. It was really, I'm Jewish, but the community was made up of Holocaust survivors, Jews and non-Jews, and we were a community of 500 persons, and I was born in Sosúa, and slowly the community at its height was like 700-800 people.
So, I mean, you are one of the few people that we know that can talk about this, but so what was it like growing up in Sosúa at that time in that community?
I would say, first of all, I had no idea of the politics that brought my parents here and the politics under which I was born here. And so I saw everything from a child's eye, and I felt that I was born in paradise. There was nothing that I didn't love about Sosúa. Whether it was the beaches or whether it was the smells or the tastes, whatever that was, I felt I was born under idyllic conditions. School to me was almost a playground. I mean, we learned, and we obviously had excellent teachers, but it was fun because I went to school with my neighbors and my friends, and it was part of our lives, but it was informal, and I would say in hindsight it was beautiful to have been taught under such idyllic conditions. We spoke Spanish in school and we learned in Spanish, and my parents were German speaking. My father was German. My mother was Austrian from Vienna. They met in England, and so they had gotten off the mainland of Europe and then decided, and there were circumstances that allowed them to make the decision that when they heard about a settlement in Sosúa or a future settlement in the Dominican Republic, they chose to become part of the settlement. My father had been on the land. He was born on the land. My grandfather was a kosher butcher, and so he felt at home here as soon as he arrived here. My mother, on the other hand, had a much more difficult time adjusting. But my own life was spent from the beach to eating schnitzels and to having birthday parties every week on weekends with my cousins, at least, or my brothers and sisters of other families that found a haven here in the DR.
So, what was Sosúa Beach like those many years ago? It must have been, in my opinion, it must have been a paradise.
It was a virgin beach. I mean, there was nobody on it except our families. Maybe there was somebody selling cocoa water. We certainly didn't have Coca-Cola, so it must have been cocoa water. And maybe we had the company of people who were fishing, but it was beautiful. I mean, it may have been one of the reasons I chose to come back to Sosúa was the beach, because it felt like a bathtub and I was the only one taking a bath in it. And I learned how to swim in the beach of Sosúa, and whatever people who are listening here, and if you're part of the community, and if you have young children, how your young children feel about getting into the water. I mean, one of the beauties about the beach of Sosúa is that it's in an alcove, and it's very swimmable and very safe. And at the time, beautiful corals that were alive, and The beach of Sosúa most probably, in its time, was the major attraction of the area. It most probably holds the most beautiful beach on the North Coast and safest beach on the North Coast.
Yeah, we all love Sosúa Beach. So now that you've given, obviously, the viewers sort of a picture of what it was like then, obviously tourism came to the area in the 70s, was it?
No, tourism actually began in Sosúa with the building of the airport. The airport was, and I watched it, by the way. I watched it being built. It began in 1970, in 1979, and it was finished in about 1982. And so it was inaugurated, I think it was in 1983. And from there on in, I would say that tourism in Sosúa began. Up until that time, if you wanted to come to Sosúa, you would have to go to the capital, and then from the capital it would take an 8-hour trek to come to the community here. And up until that time, the community was isolated from the rest of the Dominican Republic itself, and certainly from the rest of the world. And it slowly, very slowly, was opened up when the airport was finished.
So what changes did you see once the airport was finished and tourism started happening here?
To be honest with you, I wasn't happy with tourism. I could have lived the rest of my life very happily within the community and in the surrounding areas without tourism.
But it was going to come at some point.
And not that tourism was going to come, that there were going to be changes in the tone of the community that was inevitable. And so I would say that tourism, has been wonderful in hindsight. It wasn't my immediate. When I decided to come back to Sosúa, I was happy to be here in the environment in which I originally was brought up. But I have found that tourism has been, in many ways, a phenomenal addition to the community. From the types of people that it attracts and where the community is now, and that's only watching the community evolve over a few decades. But I'm happy with how it's turning out.
So, obviously, you probably had many interests. Obviously, you've lived here and in other countries, but tell us about some of your interests that you had growing up here in Sosúa, through your adult life, and your interests now.
When I actually, as an infant, being raised here in Sosúa, what has remained with me, I would say, now that you ask me the question, is that I like to collect. And so, as a youngster here in Sosúa, I was already beginning to collect shells, and I was collecting photographs of movie stars and creating albums, and also stamp albums.
Do you still have them?
My sister took the stamp album, and then obviously she hasn't found it again. But I've been a collector all my life, so at the time, those were the things that I was collecting. And I loved sports. I loved to climb trees. I was just a happy youngster in a very safe and beautiful environment. My interests then evolved. I'm a fairly prolific reader, so obviously the curiosity is there. I became interested in spiritual evolvement and the basic questions that we all ask ourselves as to why we're here and what is our purpose here. And I went through those same searches. And I find I like collecting, whether today, the other thing that really began to interest me, and it was with the beginning of the internet and learning a little bit about computers, was I began to research precious metals, and in that research I think I learned a lot about how the economy of the world works. And when I came back to Sosúa, even though I had been a teacher and my field was health and physical education, when I came back to Sosúa in the mid-70s, when I came back actually to beginner's school, and that didn't work out, and then got involved in the amber business, and that took me, it was like 30 years of my life here in Sosúa, was learning about amber, learning about jewelry, learning about making jewelry, learning about the precious gemstone that is amber, and learning about business. And I had no idea that all of that kind of lay latent in my being, and did it for survival. I mean, thought that amber would be something that I did temporarily, but it ended up being my vocation for the greater part of my adult life. And I miss it today, I must say. Amber in a way taught me. I wasn't initially that interested, but amber kind of kept pulling, and I learned a great deal about myself and about business and about art as jewelry, and so I enjoyed that part of my life, actually, very much so.
Wow. All right, we're getting through the questions here. Tell us why you're a believer in Sosúa and why you think this is a good place to live in 2021?
The original, what I saw in my own community, and I go back to 1940 and to the 1950s and maybe into the early 60s, let's say 25 years of my own community. And what was fairly easy to note over the years, a Holocaust survival community went through tremendous pain and suffering and just unbelievable horror. And the stories that were told to me were of people that were in pain and souls that became fractured. And what I noticed over the years about the community was, even though there was never complete healing of fractured souls, they were able to establish new lives, and that the environment in which they were allowed to do that was a very healing environment. And whether that involved the ocean or it involved the trees or what we eat or flowers, whatever that is for each individual, there was no question that Sosúa allowed healing to take place. And one of the things that I noticed about our own tourism was that the tourists that originally came to Sosúa as tourists then were attracted to Sosúa and came back a few times, and then saw themselves as joining the community and being an integral part of the community without standing out. That they could simply, by their own interests and whatever it was that gave them that pioneering spirit, were able to join in very easily. Now, what else our own community was allowed to establish was that we were an international community to begin with, from the outset, where the rest of the Dominican Republic were Dominican culture and Dominican people. And so we were atypical to the country. And being that, what we had was our own food, our own way of thinking, we had our own culture, and we were raised in this, in the culture that my parents knew. And so the minute the airport opened, Sosúa was an immediate highlight. That is to say, when you come out of the airport, you can turn right and you can go into Puerto Plata, or you can turn left and you can come into Sosúa. And 9 out of 10 people that came off that airplane turned left and came into Sosúa. And they came into Sosúa because it felt familiar. It had a familiarity that the rest of the country can't have and didn't have. And it can't have it because it wasn't a European culture. And one of beauties of our community was not only that we were a European culture, but we, I think, deep down inside understood how we needed to help somebody who was in our own environment as a stranger and make them feel comfortable, and also speaking the language, every language. I mean, we as a community must have spoken 20 different languages. There were people here who were very gifted in language. And so if a Russian came, then there was somebody in our community who could speak Russian. If there was a French-speaking person, somebody could speak French. English, German, it was irrelevant. The minute they came here, they found somebody who spoke their language and could answer their questions and could get their stomach or their mouth to enjoy foods that they were familiar with, and so it was very easy for any guest that came into our midst to feel at home. And I think that that is still true today.
Well,
So
you make a very interesting point, because I've always said this. There's something that differentiates Sosúa, the way it was constructed. You know, it's totally different to any other town you'll go to in this country, I believe.
there's no question about it.
And that
Question about it.
that has to go to the European settlers in the 40s that obviously were part of the planning and setup of the town. I mean, that's what sets it apart, I believe.
What you need to know is that we were completely isolated from the rest of the Dominican Republic and from the rest of the world until the airport opened. And any time anyone came here, all I can share with you is that Sosúa had the energy. It just simply had the energy of everyone who's coming through our doors who felt at home. And I still feel that's true today, even though there are 50 times the amount of people that are here. And so it's still, if anyone who is listening to my words and wants to try Sosúa, I mean, don't take my word for it. And if they were to come down, they would immediately strike conversations with people who are their culture. And that is, in my opinion, what is, I would say, the triumph of Sosúa, and what will allow Sosúa to evolve into this phenomenal spot on the planet that everyone can learn from. It's almost what we have here right now, 30 years after the airport was opened. What we have here is a mini world where you can find every culture, every language, every religion, and everyone lives in peace and in harmony and respects their neighbors and doesn't even think about, I mean, it's like normal living. And I like to use a Dominican culture comparison. And the comparison is a soup that's a stew that is made in the Dominican Republic and has the flavor of the Dominican Republic, which is called the sancocho. And the sancocho is made up of every root crop that you can possibly imagine, every meat that you can possibly imagine, and it's all put together into this one stew. And a good Dominican cook can put a flavor to it that is so unique that anyone who comes here would love it. It's Dominican food, but any culture who would taste a sancocho would immediately love the sancocho. And so sancocho to me is what's happened in Sosúa. So what we have here is a mixture of everything that makes this flavor of the region and the color of the region absolutely perfect.
Now, this question I'm going to ask you wasn't on the list, but
Go ahead.
no, obviously, and in further videos, I hope this is not the last time we get together. There's other things we want to talk about, but obviously, the beginnings of Sosúa as a community that received victims of the Holocaust, or survivors rather. Was there anywhere else in the world that was set up in the same way? Any
No.
other community that
No.
you know of?
One of the areas, and that's one of my personal interests, by the way, and I didn't think about it as you asked me the question, but what makes Sosúa unique at its very foundation is that there were survivors of the Holocaust everywhere on the planet. But there was never the establishment of a community of survivors anywhere else on the planet. So that Sosúa has at its root this history of understanding as community, not as an individual who you talk to your neighbor, but it was a community. So I would speak to not just my parents, but I would hear the stories of dozens of other people that were telling complementary stories to what my parents was telling me about. And we, as offspring of that first generation, were affected by the community and its stories, both from a standpoint of what our personal families suffered, but what the other families suffered. And that is unique to Sosúa. That is to say, they were everywhere. I mean, there most probably isn't a country on the planet that didn't receive survivors from the Holocaust. But to say that they were in community, directly established to be a community and settled as a community, Sosúa holds that distinction of, and I'm not even going to use the term Judaic history, but it is partially Judaic history, because we practice Judaism even though we had many intermarriages, both that already came from Europe as intermarried couples, and then young Jewish men that came here, chose to stay here, and then married local Dominican women. And I think another thing that we established was this assimilation and integration of the local community, of the Dominican community, who are absolutely fabulous, wonderful human beings at their core, extremely generous and giving, and invite you to their homes to eat with them, whatever that is. They have it at their core, and our own community integrated with them first, and then assimilated with them to the point where we can't distinguish today who is actually a part of this original community and who isn't. I stand out because both my parents, I was first of all born here early on, and secondly, both my parents were European. And those early second generation that were born here have made their lives not in the Dominican Republic in Sosúa, but either back in Europe or in the United States or in Canada, and their parents wanted better for them, and so they tended to immigrate to first world countries. That was also part of my upbringing, but I chose to come back. And there were very specific reasons why I chose to come back.
Well,
but that's another story for another day.
You made the right decision in coming back.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and talking about right decisions, obviously you've been involved in the real estate world here
Correct.
For many years.
Correct.
More years than I've been alive.
There you go. Okay. Okay.
I think you're a wealth of real estate knowledge. What's your opinion on the real estate market right now? Is now the time to buy?
I think this is a perfect time, maybe not necessarily to buy, but certainly to begin to become interested if Sosúa is something that you're thinking about making a commitment to spend more time here, and certainly to begin to look around, because for a few reasons. Sosúa, maybe 10 years ago, or maybe even 20 years ago. I mean, we've had different ups and downs in the real estate market, but I've seen the ups and I've seen the downs. And so what we're witnessing right now is a down period that has come to an end, and we're watching that barometer begin to turn to the upside. And I would say this is a perfect time to at least become curious and interested, because I would say, with my knowledge of this rhythm, once it begins to turn up more powerfully, many of the things that you may be able to afford today, you won't be able to afford tomorrow. And so I would say, from an investment point of view, I would say this timing is near enough. I won't say perfect, but it's getting there.
Well, and I'd like to, you've mentioned sort of ups and downs in the real estate market.
Okay.
Casting my mind back
Okay.
around 16, maybe 17 years ago, I remember we sold a beachfront lot in Cabarete. I think it was around 2,000, maybe 3,000 square meters.
Okay.
And it sold for $30 a square meter.
Correct.
What is the average price of beachfront property today? I mean, our most economic listing is close to $300 a square meter.
There
I mean,
you
it's
go.
gone up tenfold in 16, 17 years.
Okay.
I didn't really see a down.
But what I do want to say, to you, you haven't seen a down, is that there's almost very little beach property left
Yeah.
that you can select from to buy. And so I would say this to you, that outside of not having the choices that you had 15 years ago or 10 years ago, outside of the price, and I'm not even going to debate the price too much, because what was $30 a square meter 20 years ago, just the change in economics, I would say what you sold at $30 a square meter is today, in terms of value of pesos or of dollars, worth $100 at least. And so there, that comparison of enjoying a lifestyle with a certain amount of money, you have to consider the inflation rates that have occurred in the meantime, and that continue to occur. I mean, we haven't really, I think the inflation rates, and that's another reason why people should consider buying today instead of waiting for a few years from today. And that's simply the inflation rate. I mean, if we go into a supermarket here today, we no longer can enjoy that those third world prices that we enjoyed. I mean, at least when I came back, I mean, I can tell you I'm going to say it to you, even if you don't understand me, on those that are listening. But there is a food here, there's a dish here, which is called la bandera. And la bandera is, if I were to translate the word, it's called the flag. And the flag is kind of the national food of the Dominican Republic. And it consists of rice and beans. Usually, at least in my time, it was chicken, but locally grown chicken, and that hadn't been injected. And a very good salad. And so when I came back here, that dish, I could live the entire week on that dish for lunch for what is today 5 pesos. So now you translate what 5 pesos are in today's world.
Well,
and I
5 peso in today's world is maybe 2 of these.
Okay,
right?
show it.
That's
show
maybe.
it, and that's what I want to tell you.
And these are European brand cough drops, so not these, but maybe the local brand. You might
That's
get
5
2.
pesos. And I was able to enjoy 6 meals, all of what I ever needed to eat, and not just full, but delicious, on those same 5 pesos. And so that's what I'm talking about, that you cannot even, you cannot really compare prices because they're not comparable.
Well, give me 2.5 pesos, and you can have. And because funnily enough, we were talking about this the other day during the Hipólito regime, so
Okay.
2003, 2004.
Okay.
There was a bit of an economic crisis in the country. Well, the dollar went up to 50, and the pound was over 100 to 1 with the peso.
Okay.
And I remember you could, as you mentioned earlier about the difference in prices in the supermarket, I could walk into Small Playero, as I often did,
Okay.
and with the equivalent of £1 sterling, which was
Okay.
100 pesos, I'd buy a packet of 20 cigarettes,
Okay.
a big beer, and I get change. Good luck doing
Good
that
luck
now.
doing that now. Absolutely. And so, but the paradise is still here. I mean,
It's still the cheapest in the Caribbean by a mile.
It's Sosúa. I can't think of a place in the Dominican Republic, first of all, that offers what Sosúa offers. purely in culture, purely in entertainment and getting to know people and having good neighbors and people who speak your language and understand your culture, and at the same time being able to get to still beautiful beaches, having your children go to excellent schools, and that's another issue. I don't know of a community that has a better selection, and I'm a teacher, that has a better selection of different types of schools than we have in a local area of 10 kilometers in one direction and in another direction. And all of your children come away with speaking at least 3 languages perfectly. They would speak English because that's what's being taught in school. They would learn Spanish because that's what's on the street. And if they want to learn how to survive their street experience, they need to learn Spanish. And thirdly, whatever language you speak at home, whether it's French or Italian or Japanese or Chinese or Russian, whatever language you speak, those would be the 3 languages that your kid would come away with and speak perfectly without an accent by the time they're 15. And I don't know of another place on the planet where I can make that statement. And that's already like talk about culture, right? Right.
So how do you see...
And they'll learn how to dance the merengue with the Dominican.
There you go.
And
that's important.
That's really important.
How old were you when you first danced merengue?
I must have been 4 or 5.
4 or 5?
The Oases. Yeah,
Wow.
no, in the Oases. It was a rhythm, and so we, we haven't even started to talk about the community, but part of the community was that what held us together economically was that the community got involved in the meat and dairy business, and as a community, not as individuals, but as a community. And the community needed or wanted Dominicans to work with the factories within the community. And so the community wanted the Dominican, and the Dominicans wanted to be part of the community. And one of the things that happened was that this interchange of Dominican culture with European culture became or was very natural. And so we had, at the time, we only had one place as a restaurant, and that restaurant, and it was called the Oasis in German.
And that is today where Rocky's
No.
is?
No. That's today where another real estate company is on the top floor, or an insurance company is on the top floor where the
At the crossroads.
crossroad is.
Right.
And it's on when you come in from
David Stern Street, right?
David Stern Street, and when you come in and you cross the road, it was on the left-hand side. We have beautiful photographs of the Oasis in its virgin state. In its state. But what I want to say is that we had local Dominicans who were part of our community who would come into the Oasis and put on merengues, and we had from time to time we had people that came in and gave live, and we had live merengues, but we also had a jukebox in the Oasis, and some of the music was merengue music, and we all knew and watched the local, and by the way, the locals are phenomenal dancers. The men, I would say, are even better than the women, and they have a rhythm which is one of a kind, and it's just beautiful to watch them dance. And we picked that up as youngsters. We were able to pick up, and if we had that rhythm, I mean, it was virtually immediate. But it was definitely watching Dominicans dance, and it was a treat.
Well, we're going to get into the community and other aspects at a different time, but because we are sort of limited with time in this episode, I want to finish off with the last question, and it's may I pour it for you? Allow me? I should be a gentleman, shouldn't I?
But that's what he was doing when he was 20.
So when?
I love you.
Thank you, Edith. I'm very glad we managed to do this. It's been a long time coming, but we're here.
Good.
So let's end it on this question. If you were able to do it all again differently, what would you personally change in your lifetime? If indeed you wanted to change anything.
No. One of the things that I've learned in my lifetime is that to look back and regret is of no help. So you might as well not look back and regret. And so my own feeling on the subject is that I've led a very dynamic, lovely, colorful, challenging life. And I wouldn't really, maybe if I wanted to change something, it would be the way I treated maybe another human being. And that may have been with words rather, and I could have been a better human being. But actually, in terms of how my life unfolded and the decisions that I made, and sometimes the decisions that were made for me, I wouldn't change a thing. I am who I am because of it.
Yeah.
And I must say, I like who I am.
Well,
can we end on that note?
We certainly can. I want to thank you very much for sitting with us. And like I've said before, this has been a long time coming, and it's not going to be the last time we sit down and chat. But Edith truly is one of a kind. I mean, you're not going to, I don't know anyone even half as close to you. Do you know what I mean? We get together, every month, every 2 weeks. We sit down, we have lunch, and we have a chat. And it's always
and a little bit of wine.
Yeah, I'm not drinking today, not yet, but we always have a good time and we have a good chat. And Edith certainly is someone with vast knowledge and life experience, and I do enjoy sitting down with Edith. So we're going to do it again on camera very soon.
And I thank you for the interview and the opportunity.
Thank you very, very much.
I love you.
I appreciate it. I love you too. You thank you very much.
Good.
All right, guys. It's been a great interview. We'll see you soon. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was beautiful.
Very nice.
Thank you.